Today on Keep Classical Weird, we talk about the weirdest classical instrument I could think of, the classical saxophone.
A lot of what happens, and this does happen often, the comment that we get after a concert is, I didn't know the saxophone could sound like that.
Welcome, friends, to episode 20 of Keep Classical Weird. I am your host, Casey Bozell, and today we have a wonderful interview lined up to explore the world of the classical saxophone. I'll be speaking with Javier Oviedo, director of the Classical Saxophone Project. But first, to make sure we're all on the same page with this subject, I think we should explore the history of this instrument just a little bit. It's a baby instrument in the world of classical music. The inventor of the saxophone, Adolphe Sax, was a Belgian musician who created the instrument around 1840. That's well into the Romantic era. And for scale, Beethoven died 13 years before this. It had a few amazing applications in the symphonic world, notably in Ravel's Bolero. Check out episode 6 for a discussion on that awesome piece, and a fantastically macabre line in Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. These came about in the first few decades of the 20th century. But the evolution of music in the 20s and 30s was also when jazz exploded. The saxophone, being a really nimble instrument with a unique tone, made it blend in a superb way with brass, percussion, and bass. It was a natural fit into a big band atmosphere and easily stands on its own in smaller jazz combos. This is its most common application in modern times. After all, we weren't seeing Bill Clinton bust out the Glazunov concerto on Arsenio Hall. However, the sound of classical saxophone is something that never disappeared. And while it's rarer to find in a typical symphony orchestra concert, there are musicians who are dedicated to education and commissions for this instrument, making it a fast-growing genre.
Well, my name is Javier Oviedo, and I am the executive director and co-founder of the Classical Saxophone Project, which is based in New York City. We have just passed our 10-year milestone last year, and so we are looking towards the future to see where things can go.
Javier is so enthusiastic about his instrument. He connects to it, he sees the versatility, potential, and general fun in performing it. So his position as director of the Classical Saxophone Project is a perfect fit. His journey to the saxophone included a few other musical stops along the way.
I actually started on the organ.
On the organ?
Yes, back in the day at a shopping mall, in fact, I was probably, 7 years old. There was a piano and organ shop. And there was a gentleman who used to play to attract people and customers. And I was one of these just transfixed by this. I was just impressed by this so much. And I begged my parents if I could take some lessons. I always loved music class in school, the singing and, just that we didn't really learn in theory or anything like that, but we were just singing. And I loved that. So the performing aspect was already there. So I asked my parents if I could learn. I had a brother and sister. So of course, if I get something, they have to get something. And we're not a rich family. So they agreed, and I was taking half-hour lessons on the organ. Those old Hammonds with the pull tabs. Then I segued a little bit into the piano because I figured, I should maybe learn a little more piano. I wasn't really friends with the piano, to be honest. I liked it, but I didn't love it. About the 5th grade, and they still do that now, you are taken usually in the public schools, you're taken to sort of an instrument zoo at what would be your junior high, your next level. And I went to that and I tried out some instruments and I was playing some like the flutes and the clarinets. I was looking at those. My father actually was leaning toward the saxophone, not because he cared for the saxophone, but because it was a cheaper instrument. It was a used instrument. And again, he has a family that he has to try to raise and there's 2 other kids who if I get something, they get something. So can't spend a fortune on these things. And the instruments I was looking at were new. So he said, why don't you play this one? And I said, okay, I'll do that, and kind of went with it. But the idea is that I wish I had a story like Jacqueline Dupre, who heard it when she was 4 and on the radio, and that was it. No, I don't have that story. But I was very lucky though, because who became my band director, the gentleman who became my band director, was a saxophonist, and so I was able to get little extra help from him, and I did take to it very quickly. So I think he saw that, and he would talk to my folks about things like taking private lessons, about, this kid has some talent. We should do something, and I'll try to work with you. And he was very good about that. Cool. He was an educator all the way to the end of his life. He was decorated by the state of Texas. I mean, he was the real deal.
Most saxophone players are able to technically get around on all four of the main instruments in the saxophone family. That's soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. But they usually specialize in one or two, given their preference, skills, and sometimes their personality.
I'm primarily alto and soprano.
Okay.
Generally, when you can play all of them. It is, and many of us do, and I do. But there's a place. I think it goes with your personality. I mean, it really, you kind of lean towards something. I had a dear friend in college who was the most phenomenal baritone player I've ever heard. And he had the right personality for it. He was very type A, and just, you have to have a solid bass. And that was him, Me, I'm much more of the dreamer, the bird. So the soprano works for me. But usually when you're trained as a young person, it's alto or tenor. Tenor is usually for the bigger kids, because it's a big instrument.
It is, and alto and tenor are like, if you were to find a clip art of saxophone, you would see a picture of one of those.
Oh yeah, there's right? Definitely a difference. Oh yeah, there's definitely a difference in size. Well, we have the four core instruments, the SATB, but then you have the auxiliaries or all the stuff that just came, and then you have all the fun ones that just were invented just to invent something. And actually, there's a gentleman out here, Dr. Paul Cohen. He's probably the foremost historian on saxophone in the world, I would say. I mean, he lives in New Jersey. I actually play a lot of times with his ensemble at the Manhattan School of Music, and he has all the toys. I mean, all the toys. There's actually a video on YouTube, the Army Band saxophone section. They go to his house and they get to play on these things. So I actually got to go one time. It's just a carnival. I love it. And there's stuff in there. They're like, what is this thing? Why did they make this thing? A slide sax. I mean, it's got a slide on it. It sounds like a giant tin whistle. It's awesome. There's a thing on there that I told him I would bang him over the head for. It's called a Kano sax. It was made in the late 1920s. There aren't that many in existence anymore. He has two of them. I know, right? Give me one.
Yeah, seriously.
It's so beautiful. They say, the advertising says, it plays like a sax. It sounds like an English horn. It looks like a heckelphone. And that's what it looks like. It's got the bulb. It's got that shape, but it's a mouthpiece and a saxophone fingering. And I got to play a few notes on it. It's just, it's so cool. I want it. It's even an F. It's even pitched in F. So you're like, well, what can I do with this?
It's like a French horn. What the heck?
I know. I said, I want it. Because I said, all that box stuff, I want it for that.
I figured at some point that Javier would have to decide between the jazz and classical forks in the road when it came to saxophone education. So I asked him if that point ever came.
Actually, no, not for me, because I love jazz. And this is no nudge to my colleagues. I just don't play it. I don't feel it enough. It's not in my making, you know what I mean? It's not something that I prefer. That it's not my taste. I prefer classical music. I do have another story when I was young, and I do attribute this to my aunt, who was the one who wanted to be more cultural. So she would take us to the ballet. We would go to the Nutcracker, of course. This is South Texas, and in those days, it was hard to find culture in the neck of the woods. So the Nutcracker came every Christmas time, of course, like everywhere else. And I'm probably 10 years old, and I'm in the hall. Look, I can see right into the pit, and I'm, that overture starts off very softly. Well, people are still talking, and I'm 10 years old going, shushing everybody because they're playing. It's time to start. What are you doing? So that kind of music was already instilled in me at a very young age. Me personally, I love the complexity of it. I love the color and the layers and the textures that really happen. I'm sure it happens in other styles of music. I just don't know them well enough to hear it. And so I'm very amateur, I would say, if I were asked to talk about R&B or jazz or things, I'm very amateur about that. But I feel that since I was connected, I felt connected much more to this style of music early on. I feel I can express it more. I can talk about it more. For me, the range of emotion and the range of everything, really. I mean, listen to a Mahler symphony, or listen to even a Mozart symphony. There's so much happening in there. This is what I try to get with my students because they may not know a lot of this stuff, and I just say, look, what does it make you feel like? Just what does it make you feel like?
The Classical Saxophone Project is a group focused on education, outreach, composition, and performance. They're really doing a lot to get the word out about this instrument.
We have a program that is actually very popular here. We call it Saxophone 101, which is an hour-long program. I talk, because I can talk, about the history of the instrument. It's actually very interesting, the whole story with Madame Hall, this woman from Boston, the inventor himself, Adolphe Sax. There's a lot of fun anecdotes and stories. And then we punctuate it with light music, with a live orchestra. We have a live chamber ensemble. And then there's a Q&A at the end, which is very enlightening because people want to know. They just don't, nobody asks them, right? I think people don't ask about, let's say, the piano or the violin because they think they know it. Mm-hmm. I just think my instrument, here I am doing something that they're not used to hearing, and they want to know something. So when I'm talking, and we're talking simple questions like, why is it shaped like that? And so I kind of find a way to talk about why. Well, if it weren't, it would go through the floor, just little things like that. And it's not meant to embarrass them. It's just, well, you didn't know. So totally. I think that's what I love, is showing the capability and the versatility and the different facets of the instrument, not contrary to what you know already or what you think you know and what you're used to, what you're expecting. And that leads me to actually this funny story. Years ago, when I had a recital at Carnegie Hall, and we had a very difficult program. I mean, I think I had more stamina in those days. I think I can't do that anymore. It's too much. It's too long for that. I'm too old. But that included a piece that was half an hour long, very avant-garde, with all kinds of noises and stuff, with a singer and who's singing atonal. I mean, it was out there. But this piece actually is called Hamlet. And it was the 9 soliloquies of Hamlet, sort of realized for 3 people. And so
sorry,
after
the people are singer,
sax, and piano.
A piano, thank you.
Yeah. So after the concert, there was a couple that came up. I never met them before. They had seen the poster outside, and the husband happens to be a great fan of the sax. The wife is a great fan of literature. So they saw that. She saw Hamlet, he saw sax. They both came in. They both really, I don't think the guy liked the Hamlet that much, but he loved the sax, and but they were kind of arguing with each other about what they liked more, what they thought. And I said, no, that one was much better. That kind of, I love that. And they were arguing right in front of me. I said, okay, I'm going to go say hi to these people. I love playing as a soloist. I love premiering something new. and to be honest, I think all of our rep is new to everybody. So that's really great. So, and in a way, there's that I think that little bit of pressure is off. Not like you guys, everybody can sing along with your
decades of recordings.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think people are singing along with your guys' rep. Mm-hmm. So, and you've always got somebody they can compare you to, who died 40 years ago or whatever, right. It's just what people do. And I don't know if we have that.
And that's our show for today. My deepest thanks to Javier Oviedo and the Classical Saxophone Project in New York City. Our theme music is composed by Thomas Barber. Check out more of his stuff at thomasbarber.com. Web development support is provided by Tina at citybeautifuldesign.com. Keep Classical Weird is created and edited by me, Casey Bozell. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Patreon, where a subscription to Keep Classical Weird will also get you access to the growing library of music appreciation videos called Casey Does Classical. Check it out at patreon.com/keepclassicalweird. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Stay safe and stay weird.